everybody. We are here with Mr. Ray Bugg, who's the founder of Digit, as part of our leadership conversations of Quorum Cyber. We do these sessions with different people that we like and that are around us in the industry. This one is probably going to be a little bit more wide-ranging than normal. It's not just going to be a technical talk. I was interested in talking to Ray because he's also the business leader of Digit, and the world has seen quite a lot of change recently. So from founder to founder, I kind of wanted to have a catch up on what's been like to run a business in these times, and what are you seeing the future to be. So welcome on board.
Thank you. No, it's been an interesting 6 months or so, to say the least. We've seen a lot of changes in the last 6 months across the Scottish business landscape. We're one of the businesses that can't do what we normally do. We haven't been able to do anything to do with what we do.
I mean, you the hospitality retail. Yeah, every time I think of you, I can't imagine what it must have been like to go through even the early stages of this, and through now you're 6 months into it, so you're on the other side of probably the extinction level events. But how are you thinking about the world? Yeah, so how has the experience been for you, and how are you thinking about what's coming next?
It all started. I went to Indonesia at the end of January for a couple of weeks.
Show off.
Yeah,
Awesome.
a couple of weeks in Bali. And I took my dad, boys' holiday, and what we saw was this thing sweeping west. It was starting to impact on Indonesia at the time. They started doing their sort of social marketing campaign to the population and to tourists. And when I got back to the office, I sat down with the guys and I said, I think this is different to SARS. This is different to MERS. The previous coronaviruses that we had. Looking at the way that China has locked down and how it's now starting to affect other nations. And I think it just about hit Iran at the time when I got back. And then we sort of kept an eye on it. And then we saw Italy going into lockdown in February. And I said to the team, I said, this is going to come our way. I said, we shouldn't react to this once it happens. We should be prepared. We should have a contingency. I said, and my thinking is, as much to my horror, is we're going to have to move over to virtual events. I said, if we do it first, we're going to win. If we do it last, we're going to join a very crowded and saturated marketplace, and we're probably going to struggle to get the tools that we need to do it because of market saturation. So let's throw our cards in here and give it a go. And there was very little resistance internally. I think everybody sort of wanted to keep their jobs. They could see what was going to happen. But I think there was also this enthusiasm and loyalty to make sure that the company survived. And there was great resilience within. The team have been absolutely phenomenal. So we made that decision. We got in touch with all of our clients, including yourself, and spoke to you all individually. And I think out of 30 live clients we had that had pre-booked into events further down the line, we probably had one or two who pushed back from it.
That's really good. And I remember, I think the first one that you did, was it the energy event? That was the first one.
It was the Digital Energy one. And that wasn't our proudest moment, the Digital Energy one. And I'm more than happy to talk about failure as much as I am about success. We chose the wrong platform. Well, we didn't choose the wrong platform. The platform's actually the market leader. So we chose the market leader and one of the most expensive platforms because the features on it were very, very good, but the project management from their side and the delivery was incredibly poor.
Well, I mean, everybody was learning lessons left, right, and center, right? So I don't think history is going to judge us too harshly. And I think I have a very similar experience. None of the customers were out with a kind of scoring card going, "Ooh, that's not perfect. You're never doing business with you again." Everybody was if nothing else, I've seen a level of companionship through this. From most customer supplier relationships that it's been heartwarming to see. However difficult the circumstances, I've seen the community really pull together.
Everybody was really forgiving and really understanding. One, because they knew it wasn't our fault. We'd done everything on our side. It was obviously the failure on the part of the company delivering the event for us. And I think that was part of the problem, was the fact that us going from delivering events had outsourced that to somebody else to deliver our event because of the nature of the platform. So we actually got fired by that platform as a client. because we complained so bitterly and went so public with the complaint because they were doing nothing about it, the CEO got in touch and went, it's probably best if we part ways. Here's your money back for the next event you'd booked with us. And here's a little bit of compensation, and didn't ask us to sign an NDA. So we still went public and sort of said, be careful of these guys. So then we architected our own platform. We actually, white labeled the platform, and we build and architect and deliver it all ourselves now. And the experience actually with the online side of things has been phenomenal. It's been a huge learning curve. We've realized we've got to apply so much more resource to delivering a virtual event than we do for a physical event. Probably twice as many man-hours.
That's fascinating. Really, that's really good. That's really interesting.
Well, that's largely because when we do physical events, your exhibitors and sponsors turn up, they build their stand themselves, they go to work. It is that simple in some respects. With virtual events, you're having to do this build with them. You're having to give them booth building training, get them in the back end of the platform, teach them how to do this. And a lot of the times they haven't got experience with this type of technology. So we end up doing it for them. So we've actually taken on additional personnel to cope with that, which again was a bit of a gamble because obviously revenues, over certainly between the end of February and beginning of May, we probably didn't take a penny.
So how do you? I guess you've been through the. Yeah, no, I can imagine, and it's. I guess it's good to see you still here. I had no idea when I was doing the thread modeling of the people around me, right, the companies around me, who's partly very selfishly was the thread model of our customers, which was going, okay, I need to understand what happens if 50% of my customers drop, if 60%, if 20%, and what decisions do you take at what time, right? But then as you started kind of expanding that thread model to friends and suppliers and people that wouldn't affect my revenue, but that would obviously affect the ecosystem, it was a fascinating exercise to go through because you were kind of putting red, amber, green against everybody that we know, people that we kind of go out with, we have dinner with on a regular basis, used to have dinner on a regular basis. And I was really terrified for event organizations. So it was really good to see how quickly you pivoted, how quickly you listened and adapted. I mean, you had to turn from a host, which is usually what your role had been, to a managed service provider, which is a completely different service delivery model to what you had. So it's been incredible. How do you? I mean, that was what you needed to do to survive, right? And I was discussing this with a couple of companies, and we very much identified 3 stages of what we've been through. The first stage was survival, one foot in front of the other. What do we need to do to get to tomorrow? Take care of our people, take care of our customers, make sure we're all together and we're all okay. The next one was barely coping, right? So it was okay, we got this. I can look at 5 days ahead, 2 weeks ahead. I'm not looking at, am I opening tomorrow? What's the crisis tomorrow? And then there was the thriving stage. If you're lucky, you get to the, okay, we now understand what the new go-to-market is, what the new business model is. We understand how to grow in this. Where do you think you guys are right now? Did you make it to the thriving? Do you now have a new business model that is how you're planning to grow the business moving forward? Or what's your thinking around this?
Yeah, I think to coin a very overused phrase, for us, it's now the new normal, amongst the never normal that is the business landscape. It was a tough journey. It was stressful. Pete,
I mean, you are only 25 and you look like this. So
exactly, and I had a hard paper round as well. But Pete, my business partner, and I, we had to do some very long, hard thinking. We didn't furlough anyone. We couldn't furlough anyone. Otherwise, this dream couldn't turn into a reality of pivoting over to virtual events. We could have shut down editorial and just furloughed the staff. That would have saved us, $5 or $6 grand a month, which, for a small business, that's salaries to pay the people that are sort of within that profit-making side of the business. But we didn't do that because we felt obliged to the market as purveyors of information and news that this was a critical time where we were really needed by a lot of people, particularly in the technology sector, to get guidance, to get information, to get pinpoint and accurate news coming out to them about this sector that was their lifeblood. So we decided not to do it. But we were fortunate. We'd been saving up to buy an office, and we had a good cash reserve. So we sort of thought, well, let's use that. Let's use, we don't have to buy an office right now. It's probably not a good time to buy an office right now. let's use that to keep everything operational, to keep everybody in a job. So we spent some savings to make sure that that was the case. But the first couple of months were very, very tenuous. And I think one was the first sort of hurdle we had to cross was the failure of the first event, and the fact that we were moving over from having a managed service provided to us then providing the managed service and architecting and building this out ourselves. And we fast realised we'd need more manpower to do so. We were very fortunate that there were some incredibly qualified event professionals in the market for work due to what had happened. So we found someone very, very quickly, 20 years experience, very, very savvy, very, very switched on, who sort of came in and just hit the ground running and has really helped us deliver what it is we're doing. And commercially, or digital transformation we're doing on the 28th of October, you know, we've been doing that for 5 years. The first 3 years, that event really didn't commercially perform. It did okay, it washed its face, as we say. We've taken record money on it this year.
Fantastic.
You know, purely virtually. We already had sort of 15 of the 21 customers already signed up pre-COVID. All 15 have agreed to come over onto the virtual side, and we've then shored it up with additional clients as well to get it up to capacity, and it's performed well. By and large, I think the topic lends to something that everybody wants to know about at the minute, because a lot of companies have been staggering and stalling their digital transformation process, and now that's on full acceleration. That's gone into fifth gear and they've put the foot down on it. So I think COVID in some respects has been very, very productive for organisations to realise their digital transformation goals a lot sooner than they should have done, and probably made them realise that that fail fast methodology within business needs to be applied all the time. You know, too much thinking doesn't breed results.
Totally. We had this conversation as well with a different group where we were talking about some of the changes that they were making, that we were all making, right, on the basis of what COVID, the new reality that was COVID. And one of the key points that came out that we were all starting to identify is a lot of the changes we were doing were changes we knew we had to do at some point in the back of our heads. But COVID served as an accelerant to having to make that decision really quickly. And most of those changes were positive for the business. So the conversation was around how much time were we taking to make the decisions we knew we needed to take before, what the luxury that we had of time, right? Whereas now we don't have that luxury, because everybody, at least at the beginning, there was a lot of survival mode type thinking. So everybody was having to make really quick decisions to adapt. Shouldn't we always have been acting like that? So isn't there a sense of, should we not always think of ourselves in a live or die situation so that we can make those calls quicker? Even though we might be in a thriving situation, are we not almost derelicting our duties by delaying decisions that could have a positive impact to the business, that in the back of your head as a founder, as an MD, you know you have to make, but that we usually kind of gently take our time with? And now COVID provided a really good catalyst for some of those decisions. It was really interesting to see. So I was talking to a company that deals in property real estate, and they had this massive kind of show office room, and they had a second office that was almost for staff, but they were trying to continue expanding. They were moving to this massive new building, and they decided to shut it all down. They only have now one office for showroom, and that's it. And they saved themselves hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, or pounds a year. And everybody's going, we never needed it. We were just in this kind of inertia of continuing to expand, continue to have office footprint, because it was the way people did things. But there was no real business need for it, and they were spending hundreds. And we were in the same boat. We were about, post-investment, we were about to move offices to shiny new beautiful offices in Haymarket that I'd still love to be able to have. And we delayed the whole plan until 2021, because at the moment we don't need them. The office for us is a social space, but it doesn't provide any capability that we don't have remotely. It's literally just a place to meet. And there's a lot of benefits that come with that, right? So I've seen a lot of these discussions, and I'd love to see what you think. I've seen a lot of these comments of, particularly in LinkedIn, of this kind of myth of, oh, you see, businesses kept telling us that we needed offices and to be at the office, and that's been completely disproven. We've been able to operate perfectly well remotely. And my point is, it's not that binary, right? So there's some things that we're able to, as businesses, support remotely, but there are other things that are suffering. It's not a can we do it or can we not do it? It's what is suffering that what is suffering that that actually we'd like to recover. And in our case, for example, it's the thinking sessions.
Yeah.
Thinking sessions, whiteboard sessions, discussion, productive chaos, where you can kind of talk over each other, you can spitball ideas. That doesn't happen well over Teams, does it? I mean, that dynamic doesn't just flow the same. You can still do parts of it, but it works better if you have a whiteboard that you can creatively restore. Have you changed the way you guys collaborate, and how are you moving forward with that? Accepting that nobody's going back to 2021.
We had the challenge of going remote, like every business did. We had the added challenge of obviously having to pivot our operations entirely over, like you said, from being a service provider to offering a managed service. And so we didn't give it a huge amount of thought in the early stages, purely because we had to keep the lights on with the operations. And so it was just, pick up your laptop, guys, and off you go. And it was that simple. But then what I was doing is, over the next week or so, I was getting in touch with everybody individually. Are you comfortable? Have you got everything you need? So I was ordering monitors and getting those sent straight to the guys' houses, and any other peripheral items they needed, even chairs, to make sure that they were comfortable. Because you've got to realise, a lot of people when they're working from home, particularly those that might be in a flat sharing thing, the younger generation, they don't have the luxury of being able to sit in here on a beanbag in their conservatory away from everybody. Your kids are at school, that's great. But you think about other people, particularly the younger generation, the millennials, and generation, I don't know which generation it is actually, because I'm too old to remember the gens. But obviously, you look at that sort of 18 to 30 year age group, they might have flatmates and stuff like that. So they might be confined to their room, their bedroom, 8 hours a day in order to get their work done. And I think that only applies to a couple of my team. And I was quite concerned for them, because I said, are you guys okay? Is there anything I can do to help you? Is there anything that you need? And they said, look, can we come back into the office? I said, well, as soon as you're allowed to, of course you can. So we've now sort of worked it out on a rotational basis, that when the guys are fed up with home, we'll work out a rotation and a rota within the office settings. We've got 4 separate offices within our floor. So we're actually not in an open office plan. So it is actually better for social distancing, because you can close the door on everybody. So we rotate around, and we have editorial in a couple of days a week. We have events in a couple of days a week. Pete comes in a day or 2 a week as well. And we don't do that for anything strategic. We do it for the health and well-being of the team, because they just need to get out of the confines of their home.
Completely agree.
As far as us working collaboratively as a team, because we're so disparate in what we do as individuals within our organisation, we don't have too much collaboration requirements, if you understand what I mean. We just need to know where everybody's at with what they're doing. So it's more of a sort of land to check in, tell us where you're up to, and then we disperse again. We meet periodically, just so the guys can, and put an all hands sort of call on, where the guys can question anything we're doing. They can ask us about the health of the business. They can literally ask us anything, and we just sort of open the floor up to people. But apart from that, we haven't had to do too much on the sort of collaboration software side or anything like that. But obviously in the technology side, particularly when you're doing architecture and building products like you are, I see what you mean. It's very hard to not see that human connection, because body language sometimes lends to the process as well, doesn't it? If you suggest something, really, you see someone's shoulders drop, immediately it's not a good idea. Yeah.
No, totally. No, it's been fascinating, because we were always cloud companies, so we didn't have any of the technological challenges. That was fine, right? We always worked from home. Everybody works from home a couple of days a week. It's always been very flexible from that perspective. So to us, it was more the cultural challenge of how do we change, how do we behave with each other.
Yeah.
And there's some things that I've always been a fan on keeping together, right? So incident response is a fast-paced, creative type work that requires very seamless collaboration, because you need to be outsmarting an attacker, you need to be thinking ahead, you need to be looking at a situation from multiple angles at the same time to make sure you haven't missed anything, right? Because if you're working on it in a silo, you're only looking at the world from your perspective, you're going down a path. You might be right, but if you're not, you missed an entire branch of the incident that could have been super detrimental to the customer. So I've always been quite a fan on, I'm happy for consultancy to happen remotely, but incident response needs to really stick together, at least the pod the pod that is working in instant has to be together. And that's moved completely remotely. And we've had zero glitches, thankfully. I think technology and the teams know themselves so well. They've been working together for so long that has been a massive help for us. I would be really concerned for trying to build that culture into a brand new team of people if we hadn't had that history working together. I mean, you get battle tested, don't you? In my field, you get to know each other really well through, that's what we do. We do incidents. So that develops a certain amount of a pattern, almost like a neurological connection between the team members where they all know what they're doing. We were able to continue operating through technology relatively seamless. And as you were saying, my main concern was that originally, and that didn't happen, which was great. But the one that has materialized greatly, and I think everybody's been in the same boat, is the mental challenge. It's been the mental health of everybody, trying to take care of people, right? And this has been probably one of the top priorities that we've had as leaders, is to make sure that people don't burn out. None of this is normal. We're all going through one of the worst situations in the history of the world, definitely in our generation. Yeah. So to be able to cope with that, much less thrive through that, has been really difficult. I normally talk about this weird dichotomy that we had. We were closing an investment deal and having to close record years of sales and performance. We were doing great as a business, but at the same time, we had to hang the hat at night and go have really deep, difficult personal conversations and situations to deal with in our day-to-day But then you needed to come back to this really thriving, successful business that needed the best of you all the time. And it was so weird to go from both extremes all the time, to have to deal with lockdown, with 5-year-olds running around the house and all of that jazz, and the health issues. My mom in Argentina, like all our families dispersed, all of us really worried about each other. And then kind of forget that my business is doing really well and I need to keep pushing because that's my job, really. That's the way that I keep everybody employed and healthy, right? So it was so weird. How would you, one of the questions that I thought about before coming to the session was, you and I know this is the new normal, right? You and I think most of us in business already know that, look, that's it, right? This is now we operate. Things will change again in the future and we'll adapt with them again. But it will always be a new something else that comes later. It will never be back to what it was, because that's in the past. Whatever comes next is going to be new no matter what. So the world needs to keep spinning. New businesses need to be created. New people have to come in to create new startups. What do we say to somebody that was thinking a year ago to break out, do their own business? They had this idea. What do we say to them? How do we support new businesses coming into what is the most uncertain time in economic history?
I think they're going to have to see how relevant their products and service is in a COVID world. I think first and foremost, if they were planning on making hand sanitizer, they're in a pretty good place. Or pasta or toilet rolls or whatever the case may be. Anything like that. Yeah, of course. But I think anybody who was creating something which will be restricted by COVID has clearly either got to pivot the whole thing over or think of something else. I mean, I think that's pretty logical anyway.
But I was going to say, is that new? Is that really new? My whole argument when I was having these musings with a couple of friends was, what else is new? I mean, we've always been in a world where we needed to have something that was relevant, that somebody wanted to buy it at the right price, that we could add a USP to. Yes, the new variable to control for is COVID, but that's just a variable. There were hundreds others before. So is there something really different about this that changes the way people think about businesses?
I think we're seeing a bit more investor shyness at the moment. Although Existent obviously just got a great 3.6 million last week, which I think was absolutely phenomenal to see that, and to see Series A coming into Scottish startups is incredibly encouraging. So I don't think we've seen Series A for quite some time coming into Scottish businesses, particularly in tech businesses. I don't think anything changes. I think you've just got to be a little bit more diligent. I think investors are probably getting a bigger slice of the pie at the minute and citing the current situation because of that. And who can blame them? They've got to, they've got to get as much of their pound of flesh as they possibly can. And it's up to that particular entrepreneur or business leader to counteract that. No is the simple answer. we're seeing startups evolving all the time, and we're still seeing startups. We're seeing a lot of encouragement out there. You know, the Logan report has really sort of underpinned the need for extensive support. But I think what we need from a governmental side is process that is a lot quicker than the current one. You know, when it comes to support and funding for Scottish businesses, particularly those in the startup area. At the minute, I think we have a mechanism where if you want to get that sort of governmental funding, development agency funding in Scotland, at the moment, if you're not ticking certain boxes, then you're just sort of shoved to one side and discarded. That doesn't work very well when in the tech industry, because, you know, disruptive things may have been invented that don't exist before that. So there's no box to tick. So we're seeing huge amounts of talent then sort of going, well, hang on a second, I'll go down to London where they understand me and I can get the funding. There's a wider pool of options. So that's one thing I'd really like to see changing. I mean, I don't know if you've read all 90 odd pages of the Logan report. I, like most people, have sort of gone through it with a highlighter and just sort of highlighted those sort of relevant points. But I think what we're also seeing now in the startup community is more collaboration. 6 years ago, when I first started this business, startups weren't talking to each other, sectors weren't cross-pollinating, and that's one of the reasons I started Digit, was so I could cross-pollinate sectors. So people in oil and gas could get tips and tricks from people in banking, people in manufacturing could get tips and tricks from people in government, or maybe the other way around. But you know, it was because everybody used to sit in their own pocket, their own cluster of their vertical. But then what we saw was technology then didn't become vertically specific. Technology nowadays is for all sectors.
Agnostic, totally agnostic. Yeah,
So bringing people together to talk about how to best use it. So to go back to the initial point, is it slowing down startups? I think there's probably a lot of founders that are probably just sort of saying, I'll just sit this out just for their own sake. I think that's a confidence thing. The culture hasn't changed. The collaboration is still strong. You know, I think there was over 1,000 people at Scotsoft yesterday. So there's clearly the appetite for people to collaborate. We're getting record numbers into our events as well, where people want to engage and talk and stuff like that. Even in the virtual setting, people are wanting to come on and network and talk about what they're doing. EIE, I'm sure, will be a massive success. You know, that's in a couple of weeks' time. I would expect to see 1,000+ people attending EIE. Startup Summit has just gone from strength to strength. Startup Summit was tiny 3 or 4 years ago. You know, again, they'll have thousands of people on there. There's still a huge appetite for people to create and then take that out into the business world. I just think that the support mechanisms in Scotland could do with refining. I know that change is afoot within that mechanism. Not something I can discuss at the moment because it's not due to be announced yet. But changes are afoot, and I think we're going to see some really positive changes on that. But I think having Kate Forbes as the minister who's driving the digital economy in Scotland, I think has been really, really good. She gets it. She understands it. She's making herself available as much as she possibly can. I think the future looks pretty bright.
Look, so from this point of view, from this side of the chair, I guess I've just been through an investment round, our first actual proper investment round, and it was a fascinating exercise. It was the first time I run this exercise by myself fully, and it was a really fascinating exercise. And I was surprised actually that there is people out there looking to invest, and we started just before COVID, right? So we started doing all the interviews in around December, and we ended up doing the entire due diligence through Zoom and Teams because it was all literally in the middle of COVID and lockdown in the UK. We completed end of June, so we hadn't seen each other. Nobody ever met other than through Teams. It was a fascinating new world, I guess, for the investor, the PE houses, the DD houses, to do it all that way. And I was really fascinated by the fact that there was money out there. I agree with you. I think the conditions on that money were probably stricter than ever before. And I haven't been through this before, but it felt they were very risk averse. And the reason we did it is we were profitable, which is weird for an investment. We were already doing good turnover. We'd been around for a couple of years, so we survived. So we were a relatively safe bet, I guess, compared to others.
You also had a product which was pretty much in demand as a result of COVID, because we saw certain technological products and services. You know, you couldn't buy a laptop in April.
Yeah, no.
You couldn't buy a webcam. I was hunting high and low for a decent Logitech webcam for us to stream our events. Could I find one? Could I help? Nowhere. And I mean, absolutely nowhere. Yeah, a lot of things, I had more chance of buying toilet paper in March than I did of buying a webcam. But then the demand for security products and services, in certain areas went through the roof, particularly those that were sort of, shoring up the VPNs, for example, because of, an oil and gas company that I know, the CIO, I spoke to him and I said, how are you doing with remote working? He said, well, we've gone from 200 people normally sitting on the VPN to 2,500 overnight. He said, and it's bending, and I need, and that's why he got in touch with me, was to see if I knew somebody who could offer that quick fix in terms of, because obviously everybody offering those services was just booked out at that time. So that massive sort of universal pivot we'd seen. Which,
I guess, going back to the point, I guess it's really we work a lot with universities, for example, recruiting. We work with Napier and Abertay and Strathclyde and Glasgow Cali. We see all that young talent coming up, and last couple of times I've been speaking to them, they're terrified. They're absolutely terrified of what comes next, right? Because they don't know what world they're walking into. And we were talking about founders before. I think a lot of the eager risk-prone funders that normally come to the universities are going to be really stepping into an unknown, which I can't possibly be jealous of. I mean, that must be a really awkward feeling. But from the point of view of the industry is thriving, and I think we need to help them to a certain degree feel safer about what's coming, because we need that talent to keep coming. Otherwise, the whole puzzle unravels, right? Scotland is uniquely placed. We've always agreed on this. It's one of the reasons I started in Scotland. It's my second time around here. The amount of talent that this country creates and how it centralizes that talent in a couple of cities, meaning that you can really collaborate between Glasgow and Edinburgh in particular. Those two hubs are massive for security and technology in general. We are uniquely placed in the world to compete, but if we don't provide a certain amount of protection and encouragement and a little bit of air cover to this new generation, I think we're going to lose that competitive edge, and that can really unravel the whole strategy here for what we're trying to achieve as a country. And I hope, and I give Kate Forbes is fantastic in role, so we're incredibly lucky to have her, and she's got it together in a way that it's comforting to see the country be so proactive and putting somebody like Kate in position.
There's been some good initiatives coming out of government in particular as well. A digital development loan, for example, that's a really good initiative. Interest-free loans to I think there's about 200 million available.
All in one go.
All in one go. But I think businesses can borrow up to $1 million or $500,000, something in one go. So it's available for all sizes of business to consume. But I think also the fact that Kate has made sure that every event that is going on for the technology community at the moment, she's at. Words of reassurance, very proactive. I mean, we're speaking to her policy advisors on a regular basis, just so we can get that landscape, but also feed in what we're finding from the marketplace as well. We're very much seen as a sounding board for government, so we can, because we're researching all the time. We're constantly researching at Digit. To do the events, we have to make sure the market is right for the agenda. So we're speaking to their advisors all the time, and I've never seen Scottish Government being more proactive with the wider community and the business community than they are now. And I don't think that's because they're trying to rescue anything. I think they're just realising very, very quickly the benefits there is of this collaboration. When you look at the Logan report, every other report like that has been written by a career civil servant. This has been written by a businessman. And it pulls no punches, and it's going to be more impactful because of that, because they've outsourced it to the brains within the industry, as opposed to assuming this is what industry needs from a governmental or a ministerial perspective.
And that's where we need to challenge ourselves, right? So there's this archetypical perception of what public sector looks like, right? What a traditional public sector organization looks like, what central government looks like, and how they behave, that bureaucracy, that endless kind of forms by triplicate process in order to get anything done. And I think we are in a unique opportunity to dramatically shift that. If the Scottish Government actually takes into, like, owns up the report, owns the challenges that we have, but more importantly, the opportunity that we have to actually turn that around and turn it into our biggest asset.
Yeah.
What Scotland can look like in 4 years is something quite special. It can be a unicorn country. If we do this right, it can be up there in the ranks of Israel. It can be up there in the ranks of the highest innovators that don't need the mass that is the US. They don't need the huge numbers of people. It's just that cohesion between private sector, education, public sector collaborating to create new value, to bring new value. I mean, the talent is here. We have the size and the agility to move, should we choose to move that fast. And I think now that the leadership is inviting those opinions, and we're documenting those opinions, and there's ideas being tabled, I think we're there. And I think it's one of those interesting challenges between Brexit and everything that's happening with COVID, and it's somehow it's serving into a melting pot where it just feels like it might be the best thing to come out of all this mess, is the ability to reshape ourselves as a nation.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's going to be long term. It's going to be good for the economy, because I think what business leaders are doing is they're being very self-reflective over this period, and giving themselves a few harsh truths, but also being held to account by their workforce if things do go wrong. I think for us personally, we'll come out of this and become a bigger and stronger organisation as a result of it. One, because of the decisions we made when we made them. Regrettably, other people in my industry, and I've been speaking to my industry constantly since February, and the first thing I said to everybody is, do what I'm doing. Guys, do what I'm doing.
Just move.
Go virtual. Go virtual. You know, if we can't do events, you've got to be offering something else. And a lot of them, unfortunately, now it's right, we'll just shift it into Q3, we'll just shift it into Q4. And they fell on their backside because now they can't deliver what they've postponed. So
it's the blockbuster problem, right? So Netflix ate its lunch for exactly the same reason. Exactly. You need to be where the consumers are. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think another reason why it was such an easy decision for us is because when we launched our first virtual event, we had the world's biggest captive audience we're ever going to see. Everybody was sitting where they could consume my product, in front of their laptop. They couldn't go anywhere. So, you know, the first event we did, we saw 150% increase on the numbers of delegates and registrations that we'd seen on the physical event the previous year. That's starting to work its way downwards now, because obviously we were new to the market, so we were one of the only options out there for people, so everybody came to us. Now. Obviously, we're seeing more market saturation now, and with that, we've expected it to go down. But, you know, we're still seeing an average of about 500 or 600 registrations now for everything we do. So we're still seeing a sort of 50% increase on everything we've done physically previously. But it's not a physical event, like you said. You know, when it comes to seeing humans, you can't hug people. We can't have that. You know, we can't share a scotch. Well, not share a scotch. I'd rather have my own. But you know, we can't do that anymore, and that is what fundamentally I think we are missing is human.
I think, but that's a human thing, right? So, and we need to acknowledge that we're not going to get that. It was interesting for us as the customer, to a certain degree, as the sponsor of the event. We have obviously objectives. I mean, there's obviously a commercial impact or a desire to make the brand known, share the message, share the ethos, see people, be seen. There's reasons we do these events and pay to be in those events, right? I think we had to shift our perceptions of these events as well. It wasn't just you having to shift how you deliver the product and how you create the events. It was also us as customers having to shift what our expectations, what our way of interacting with you. You can't save this problem just by yourself. If customers don't move with the problem and move to the new solutions and find new ways to interact with you, to make that symbiosis work. And we found it challenging as well, right? So we had to measure performance differently. We had to adjust expectations different. And it was ours to lose to a certain degree. You were doing everything you could to make the platforms available, the channels available. Mm-hmm. And you were kind of hosting, look, guys, we'll do the best we can. What do you need? How can we do it? But it was equally challenging for us to understand how to best interact with you, and how to, with events in general, not you guys. But it's been a fascinating journey. And as you said, I think it's here to stay, right? So I think it added new strings to the vote. Even if the world goes back to being able to host events and we go back to the hugs and the whiskeys, which I cannot wait for. I think this channel has opened a whole bunch of new possibilities. The ability to have international speakers, international attendance, without any friction, right? Without any cost implications to the attendance delivery, has meant that the ability to present the Scotland brand, for example, outside of Scotland, it's infinite now. Now you can be presenting the Scotland brand in a Middle Eastern event tomorrow and show all the talent without having to imply massive amount of cost. I think for companies like yourselves to now go global and try to spread that message globally, the opportunity's never been better.
That's a good point, because I've had this conversation with a number of people. They've gone, "Oh, you're borderless now," and I sort of thought, well, I am, but I think if I try and internationalize myself too much, it takes away what we stand for, and that's us being the Scottish community. So we're always welcoming people into our events, and we have people from Bermuda, Kazakhstan, Russia coming to the Digital Energy Summit. I'm like, where the hell have these come from? Because I've not marketed to them, but they've found us, whether it was the SEO awesome, or whatever the case may be, or inter-industry chatter. They found us, they came to the event, and it was absolutely amazing. I loved it. But I think, and it's a conversation we're having at the moment within the organisation, is with the market saturation, are we not a more saleable commodity if we stamp Scotland onto what we have and make sure that we specifically service this geography and harness and keep it and catch it and nurture it as we have done for the last 7 years, or go out into the great unknown where everybody else is trying to go at the moment, particularly in my industry. Everybody's saying it's borderless now, anybody can do it. It is. It also means that the choice has become exponential now for the consumer. Particularly with events, so there's far too many to choose from. So I think for certain businesses, yes, the world's your oyster at the minute, particularly in as a service products.
We benefited. The reason I mentioned it is we benefited from this enormously. It's been the greatest normalizer to a certain degree to our go-to-market strategy. We now have customers in South Korea, Australia, Canada, US. We were always developing an internalization strategy, but now everybody's pitching over a Zoom call, right? There's no longer the lunches and the entertainment, the golf courses that would act as a filter for a company my size.
And inertia for closing it down as well.
Now it's wonderful. Now everybody gets 1 hour. You present your ethos, how you do it, how you think about the film. The customer gets exactly the same UX, and they pick the best. There's a meritocracy to the way procurement works right now that we've never seen before. So we are loving that side of the new world, because it's almost a little bit more just in terms of customers' approach to market. But at the same time, I totally hear you, and I think you said it before. Leaders are becoming much more insightful into their own abilities to deliver and what's the uniqueness that makes them special. Recognizing that your product is Scotland, that your product is not just the comms, it's not the strategies. Your product is the Scotland community. Is super intuitive. It makes absolute sense.
Yeah, and we are going to have further conversations. One thing that Mark Logan put in the report is that we need to have a major event that highlights Scotland as a nation and its technical capability. That's a conversation I'd like to have with Scotland about, with the Scottish government, about helping to organise that, or if not organise it, because that's all we've done for the past 7 years, is put Scotland on the stage and invite people in to consume what's happening here. I think very exciting times ahead for Scotland. And with the right leadership, which I think we now have at a ministerial level, and the changes, which I can't mention, that are going to be happening within certain support organisations, I think we're going to see an acceleration of the size of the technology industry in Scotland. But I think equally, I think people just love Scotland as well. So when people have come here to work here and on a 6-month contract, and the amount of people that I've spoken to in the industry go, I was only supposed to be here for 6 months. Well, how long have you been here? 12 years. Why? Because I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave. Yeah, my contract ended, but I wanted to stay, so I found a job in so-and-so, or I went to that bank, or whatever the case may be. I think Scotland's uniquely positioned, I think, on the world map as just this amazing place to live and work. Edinburgh, for example, wherever you are, you're sort of 20 minutes away from where you work, between your house and your work, if you're lucky. And I think that whole sort of work-life balance really measures up in Edinburgh, whereas if you live in London, London's horrific.
Look, I love London, so I'll put my cards on the table. I love London. I lived there, but I choose Edinburgh as my home. Edinburgh chose me. I came here in
I
2010.
hate London.
Really, I love London. I love London. I was born and raised in big city, right? Buenos Aires, born and raised, lived in the middle of the chaos of one of the biggest Latin American cities. It was awesome. Moved to London, and it was just that on steroids, a first world version of that. It was just fantastic. I had the best time of my life. But not only the creative power that Edinburgh has, the history, there's a balance to the force in Scotland that it's really hard to find. And I've traveled quite a lot for work. I've been very fortunate. I've traveled through America, through Europe, through Middle East. I never did Southeast Asia or anything around that side of the world, but for the Western side of the world that I've traveled, Scotland in general and Edinburgh in particular is to me the best place in the world. And I made my home here. I brought my kids back here, and I'm planning to stay here forever. So there's a duality to this where you go, I'm running a business, I'm growing a business, and we're becoming international, we're making it big. It's going to get to a point where we're going to have to make some really tough decisions. And I hope that we as a nation have moved fast enough that we have the capability to retain companies like what hopefully I'm becoming, because I would hate for the conditions to not be there where I can continue to make Quorum Cyber thrive and stay in Scotland. I don't want that to be a juncture in my journey, right? I want to be able to be here 10 years from now with a company 100 times the size, delivering value everywhere in the globe as the default security vendor, right? That's my dream. And I just hope that we can do that while retaining our foothold in Scotland. And I think, as you said, we're in the right track, we're in the right direction. And right now, all the cards have been reshuffled, right? So we have a clean deck of cards. We have an absolute opportunity ahead of us. And I just hope we make the best of it.
I think one of the sort of COVID barriers to that though is going to be when you see companies like Modular, for example, who set up one of their headquarters here in Edinburgh to scale out user testing. They've done the same thing. Edinburgh has been chosen as the EMEA headquarters. I think we're going to see a lot of international players that are putting that headquartering aspect of their growth on hold because they don't need to. Now that we've got this new way of working out, well, hang on a second, we're based in the States. Do we need an Edinburgh office? No, we don't, because we're selling everything anyway at the moment. I think equally when it does come back into force. I mean, what's your thoughts about about the future of Quorum, and do you see yourself having other locations? Let's put COVID to one side and let's pretend, God, please, that it doesn't exist. But do you see Quorum having other international offices in the future?
Yeah, so we already have the business plan, and we had it before COVID. Well, it was there shaped before COVID hit. We've accelerated ever since. So yeah, the regionalization. There's some regions that you can deliver remotely without having a local presence, and some regions where you really need the local talent and the local presence and the local connections. There's reasons why it's beneficial. There's also so that's almost a commercial angle as well, isn't
it? It's fitting into the culture there as well, isn't it?
Absolutely, massive part of it. And also there's a sustainability element to that, where you need to build value and deliver value everywhere you go. This model of a centralized value extraction company, so you go sell but you take the money all away from the country you're delivering the service in, doesn't really work. It's not sustainable anymore. The way that we're trying to grow Quorum Cyber is, if we're really moving into a new region, if we want to be a significant player in a new region or country or city, there has to be a value return in that city. So we are looking at Middle East. So our next move is to the Middle East, for example. We're opening an office in Dubai. We're going to service UAE and Saudi Arabia. And we're going to do that entirely with local talent, because the privilege of being able to partner in a new region like that with public sector, with the big brands like Microsoft, who's one of our biggest partners, there's a dependency there that you need to be able to help the local communities build value there, the same way that we're doing it here in Scotland. It is wrong to want to extract all of that and bring it here. And that's, to me, what the future of good business is. Yes, we want to grow and expand internationally. Absolutely. We're working a lot more in the Middle East than we ever were before. We're doing a lot of work in Australia, Australasia in general. So we're thinking about a New Zealand office. That also helps on operational level, the follow the sun model, where we can have people awake when we're asleep over here. So there's some operational benefits as well. But it all has to be driven by the ability to also return value to the region you're operating in. We cannot be, I don't think, at least it's not the way that we want to do it, where we're in a value extraction relationship. We want to be in a value addition relationship. So yeah, we're definitely looking at global expansion. We're literally opening an office as we speak.
That's exciting.
It is exciting. All right, bud. I think I'm going to need to start closing it down. Do you want to do final thoughts?
Bite of muffin then.
Have your muffin while we do final thoughts. Is there anything in particular you wanted to cover that we haven't touched on?
No, I think I'm the eternal optimist. I've always been a glass half full person. So I'm always thinking that whenever something goes wrong, we're going to be able to put it right. We're going to rally. We're going to collaborate. We're going to talk. And I think that sort of land grab that everybody was doing at the start of COVID, I think has simmered down a little bit now. And everybody's about helping and building the bigger picture out of how we move forward as a nation. And I said it sounds very politician-based sort of statement that, but we really have seen it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I always see the glass as completely full. It's just half water, half air, and I think that hasn't changed. To me, we are just living in the same. So even though some variables have changed, what you're seeing here is good forward-thinking companies able to adapt and work together collaboratively. Companies that were not able to keep up with the challenges around them, just having an acceleration of their challenges. But one of the surprises to me here was there were very little surprises. It was a series of variables that changed really quickly that meant we had to make very quick decisions. But the trends that were there were just magnified, really, right? They were just accelerated. And I think we've realized that the world can move at a different speed. And that's where being able to be flexible, adaptable, ethical, collaborative, those all beautiful attributes, I think are paying dividends. And it's almost like if you want to take a positive spin, I think it's the companies that were the better companies, the companies that were friendlier, more ethical, more collaborative, more flexible, that are thriving through this. I'd love to see that. At the same time, I'm very conscious there's a lot of people having a really bad time, right? That they did nothing wrong. Nobody's to be blamed here. And we cannot be tone deaf to the fact that there's a heck of a lot of people suffering right now because they're unemployed.
I think the issue of repaying debt is going to be the biggest thing. Where everything's been put on hold. Those people that have taken out a C-bill, coronavirus business interruption loan, those people that have deferred VAT payments, that money's got to be paid back. And that's money you hadn't planned in. So I think we will see, I think it's the calm before the storm of business failure, unfortunately, for a lot of people. There's a lot of people out there that are saddled with debt they just hadn't planned for. And they're either going to, I think the M&A market will probably grow exponentially over the next 12 months. I think we're going to see a business snapped up. Even people within the events industry are still being bought and sold at the moment. We're seeing a lot of acquisitions within the events industry because they see these brands sort of coming back into force once it all dies down. But I bet they're getting a better deal than they would have done 9 months ago. But that's the only fear I have is I think a lot of people are putting on a brave face. We don't know what the reality is for a lot of people. There'll be one person in their office and another person on LinkedIn, painting a very positive picture of everything and going home, sitting in the corner and crying themselves to sleep. Unfortunately, there's probably the reality for a lot of people. But I don't
even for us, right? So even us, which we're doing good, and I'm very conscious that it can all change tomorrow. Even though we're enjoying a good moment, this is a collection of moments, and it can all change tomorrow. And where we were enjoying a certain amount of positive news and stories and new customers and all that jazz, things can change tomorrow in a way you haven't predicted because it is deeply unpredictable. And that's where, again, I think it's that ability to pivot and do as much threat modeling as you can and just not trying to be or acknowledging that you need to measure yourself differently, and keep track of different telemetry in order to know what's going to happen. Well, look, best of lucks with all your future endeavors. I hope to attend the next digital event. What's your next event? What's coming in the agenda?
Next event's digital transformation. Got some amazing speakers for that. In particular, a very good friend of mine, Louise Smith, who's the head of digital. She's the chief digital officer for Lloyd's. She's going to be coming to speak. She's an amazing speaker, and a whole range of other amazing people. Mark Curtis, from the co-founder of Fjord as well, who I saw speak at the beginning of lockdown, and he's got great vision into the social economic changes we're going to be seeing, and those cultural changes that we've touched on as well. So amazing speakers there. I think we've got about 250 already registered with a month to go. I would expect 600 or 700 registrations for this. Hopefully, it's going to be a big event, because I think everybody's got this on their agenda. You know, how are you transforming data protection, which we organised with the Information Commission's Office on the 10th of December. We've already got 100 there, and we haven't even sent out an email yet. So where they've come from, I don't know. That's us just teasing on social. And you know, so we've got 100 cyber people, DPOs so far. We'll have 400 or 500 registering for that. You know, just talking about data protection. But I think, you know, as you'll know, with data protection, that's all changed in recent times as well. What are we going to do with Brexit? Are we going to mutually recognise the GDPR, or are we going to set up our own policies, which will be a pain for everybody? But also the amnesty that's been afforded to businesses over the last 6 months by ICO, so they can communicate out to people that maybe they shouldn't be, that's going to come to an end soon as well. But we're also going to be talking about stuff like when you're architecting your transformation or your IT journey within an organisation. Most people then think about how they protect that as an end part of the project. What ICO are very keen to do and are going to be talking about is how you build that into the project from the get-go, and build something to be GDPR compliant, not make it GDPR compliant at the end. So that's interesting. Now, ICO have gone from sort of being very policy driven to now being very technology driven, because they see that as a pivotal aspect of companies being compliant from the get-go. And then next year we're going to do a new event around marketing technology. So our first MarTech summit hits the grounds in February, which we're really excited about.
That's going to be a very different change. Yeah, I'd love to see that conversation, because we must have learned 100 new lessons out of this.
Yeah.
Consuming as a verb has changed.
But we haven't done that as a sort of knee jerk to COVID. That's one that we had planned in as part of the 2021.
Just really well timed.
It's just perfect timing. And there's never been a MarTech summit in Scotland. There's marketing conferences where they talk about the wider marketing, you know, industry, but nothing about that sort of deliverable and the technology and the funnels that people are now using and the analytics behind it all. So yeah, really interesting times. We're very excited about what's coming forward.
Well, look, it was great to see you. Stay strong with us. As always, reach out if you need any help. Good to see you, buddy. Take care.
All the best. Take care.